A proposed bill in the General Assembly could slash boat property tax for South Carolina boat owners. I get reaction from Gettys Brannon of the South Carolina Boating and Fishing Alliance for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Gettys Brannon, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Excited to be here, Quintin. I've watched your stuff for a long time, and I finally made it. I'm on Quintin's Close-Ups.
Well, I appreciate you watching. I thank you for your time as well, because I'm bringing you on, obviously, because you are the Chief Executive Officer of the South Carolina Boating and Fishing Alliance, better known as SCBFA, which is a united voice of boating and fishing in South Carolina. The SCBFA brings together manufacturers, dealers, retailers, of course, boaters, and anglers under one banner to grow and protect access to great water, great fishing, and of course, great experiences that make South Carolina waterways some of the best in America. So tell me, what's new, what's now with SCBFA?
Yes, sir. So we started this back in 2021, and it's a industry trade group, as you mentioned. A lot of our great partners here in our state. We're a $6.5 billion industry to the state of South Carolina. We have 28 boat makers. We have the 3 largest fishing tackle manufacturers in the world, with Pure Fish and Rather Outdoors and Shimano, which is down in y'all's area. And out of those 28 boat makers, out of the top 10 in the world per volume, 6 of them are in South Carolina. So we have the most unique economic mix of boating and fishing companies in the entire world here in our great state. And of course, we have the natural resources to back it up. And so we're always working on positive legislation for boaters and anglers in our state. Obviously, anything that's good for boaters and anglers is good for our industry, but our number one goal is to make sure that our consumers can have more days on the water at the end of the day with anything we're working on.
And I want to get to that in just a second, but you mentioned the consumer, Gettys. Let me ask you this then. What does the consumer want and need right now when it comes to boating and fishing here in South Carolina?
Affordability. And Quintin, one of the things that we see the most right now in the boating and fishing industry is a barrier to entry. And it's not only that, in the last 30 years, obviously boats have gotten bigger. They're run by bigger motors. And so, of course, that does have a cost associated with it. But really, one of the things that we can control, or should be able to control through our state government and through our county governments, are our property tax rates. We have the highest property tax rates on boats in the entire country. The second highest state to us is Virginia, and I found the highest county in Virginia, and they're still 49% lower than we are here in South Carolina. And so we're talking a big gap. There are only 13 states, to our estimation, that charge property taxes on boats. And as I said, we are much higher than the rest of them. We're about 300% higher than our neighboring states. And that equals about a 75% less tax bill when you look at it. When you see a boat in Charleston County that's $1,646 on, let's just say, a $50,000 boat, that same boat in Brunswick County, North Carolina would be $236. The same boat in Savannah would be about $800. So you're talking, there are some differences by counties, no doubt, but what we're seeing is South Carolina simply not competitive with other states. And Quintin, what we're seeing with that is folks over that have nicer boats, they don't register them here. They register them out of state. They take them out of state for 6 months out of the year. And there's a lot of money that follows those boats. And that's a lot less days on the water for folks in South Carolina. That's a lot less money for retailers, tackle shops, marinas, gas stations, whoever it is that's supporting the industry. And on another note with that, the reason we don't see a lot of boat yards in South Carolina, though we have such a rich heritage in the boat building industry, is because of the property tax rates. Folks aren't going to bring their sport fishing yachts from, Maryland or Virginia or even North Carolina or Georgia here to South Carolina to be fixed, because if it's here a day over 179 days, they're going to get a property tax bill at a 10.5% rate with some of the highest millage rates in the entire country.
I want to get back to that in just a second, too. And I love Savannah, by the way. But let me ask you, where exactly are these people registering their particular boats when it comes to out of state?
Well, as I said, I mean, you could simply take and I have a county by county comparison on
Oh
the
yeah,
border. So if you look at let's go to the upstate for a second. You
sure.
have a $50,000 boat in York County. That boat would be about $2,693. Now, it's going to depend on where they are within the county, but I tried to take pretty reasonable millage rates to come up with a good average. That same boat in Charlotte, North Carolina, is $378.60. And so when you live that close to Mecklenburg County, if you're in York County, it could be as simple as them having a piece of property right across the state line that they could keep their boat. And again, we're talking about a pretty modest fishing boat or modest bass boat or pontoon boat at the price range that these numbers are from. The folks that have the nicer boats, they don't even think about it anymore. And the issue being is our neighboring states are so much lower. Now, of course, you're going to have some folks that have them registered in Florida or in another state that just doesn't have property taxes on boats at all, and they will move those throughout the year, and they use it as a vacation to go fishing. But again, it's about the lost revenue. We're getting none of a bigger pie of these dollars because we're not competitive. So we're getting nothing of something that is available to us because our tax rates are so high on boats.
Let me ask you bluntly: do you want South Carolina to eliminate the boat property tax?
Oh man, in a perfect world, it'd be great if we exempted property taxes on boats and get to where there are only 12 states in the United States that have property taxes on boats, and there are. I'm glad you brought that up, Quintin. There are states that do have property taxes on other items and vehicles and other things, and boats are exempt. It's every state is different, but you know obviously, yeah, in a perfect world, it'd be great if there weren't property taxes on boats. But Quentin, that brings me to another point.
Yes, sir.
When you think about boat ownership and you think about the affordability of a boat, or whether you're talking about hunting, whether you're talking about fishing, any sort of sportsman related activities, the end user does not mind giving back to the resource. And so one of the issues we have in South Carolina is we have some of the lowest registration fees in the entire country at $10 per boat. That's the money that goes back to the resource. That's the money that goes back to DNR. That's the money that goes back to habitat restoration. That's what goes back. We've got this derelict vessel problem down there. The reason they're having and they're proposing raising registration fees by $3 is because they don't have the money to get them out. And so what we're seeing is we're not asking not to pay anything, but if the consumer is going to pay a substantial amount of money, it should go back to the resource. There should be some sort of balance where our natural resource sees a return, or I should say our end user sees a return on their investment in their public funding from our natural resources department or from our state or from our counties. And right now we simply don't have that balance. And so with registration fees being the lowest, or some of the lowest, I should say, and even our fishing license costs are some of the lowest in the country, you don't ever want to talk about raising those things when the bass boat, pontoon boat, john boat, skiff owner down there in the low country is already so overburdened by a property tax bill that they have to pay every single year. It does vary by county. I mean, in Richland County, the same boat that I think I said was right over 1,600 in Charleston, it's almost 2,800 in Richland County. So there's no uniformity in any of this. And what we would hope for at the end of the day is to create a way that when boat people and fishing people and hunters put more money into the resource, how do we get there?
How do we get here right now without this balance that you want?
So right now, there's simply no balance. And so I think that if we are able to cut our property taxes by 50% by supporting House Bill 3858, led by Representative Gary Brewer down in y'all's neck of the woods, and by the way, Quentin, that bill has over 40 bipartisan co-sponsors on it. This is both sides of the aisle saying that property taxes are too high. Matter of fact, one of our main supporters, he had his wife on last week with Miss Pinckney,
Right.
Miss Rutherford, I should
Right.
say, is Representative Rutherford. Representative Todd Rutherford's doing a great job out there talking about how we're just not competitive. But we're seeing this throughout the entire state legislature, especially on the House side, that there are bipartisan, there is, I should say, bipartisan support um, for this measure. And on the Senate side, we have Senate Bill 317, which Senator Goldfinch has introduced for a 50% property tax reduction as well.
You talked earlier about the lost revenue. So, how much is South Carolina actually losing with all of this property taxes that you all are paying?
So, without giving up too many
Sure. Oh, yeah.
direct numbers, I'll say we have surveyed about 8 of our dealers over the last few weeks to see how many people they believe are moving their boats out of state during different parts of the year, and it's multi-millions of dollars of sales that are going out of state,
Wow.
and it's in the tens of millions. It's not even a couple million.
This might be off the cup question, but let me ask you: how do they actually employ people in the industry when all of this money is leaving?
So again, South Carolina has 6 of the top 10 boat makers in the world and 28 boat makers total. South Carolina is still a small portion of of what their target market is. But I'll also say that the ownership of boats in South Carolina is still not nothing. I mean, we still have 361,000 registered boats in our state, according to DNR, and just in Charleston alone, there's 31,602 registered watercraft. You know, what is that actual number? We don't know. It's there are people that are here, and that's the reason you're seeing the conversation on social media, on Boat Life Charleston or whatever pages you're on, where you're seeing people say, "Why are we paying the most in the country?" Especially if our ramps aren't in the best shape, especially if our money is not going back to the resource. And so, you know, would this help the industry? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, this is for the overburdened, hapless boat owner that's been paying, 300% more than our neighboring states for however many years. And that's the thing about property tax, too. We're talking about something that year after year after year, at the end of it, you're essentially renting your boat back from the government.
What are those? What are those secret burdens that we don't know about when it comes to these property taxes for the boating and fishing industry?
You mean what are the
Yeah, what are
can you
those?
rephrase that? Sorry.
Yeah, oh, no worries, no worries. What other burdens do you see on the horizon as a result of these high property taxes?
I think the burden is obviously financial. I mean, if you look at a finance boat, and let's say you pay a $300 or $400 payment on your boat per year, and this is a cash conscious customer that budgets every month. At the end of the year, they're having to come up with 3, 4, 5 times their boat payment to pay it one time. And so, what I saw at the Columbia Boat Show, what I've seen at the Charleston Boat Show earlier this year, there are people that come up and say, "Man, finally, my boat's not getting taxed that high because it's gotten older, and I don't want to buy a new boat. I don't want to buy a new used boat or a newer used boat
Because
because
of this.
the because of the property tax." I mean, this isn't a small number. And again, um, I think that there just needs to be fairness. And when we look at the way that the current system's set up, there is no fairness when it comes to boat property taxes.
Where do you see this particular bill heading next?
So we hope to have a hearing on H3858 in coming weeks. And reach out to your House member. Go to lowerboattaxes.com. You can sign up there for updates. We hope to have a Senate hearing in the next few weeks as well on S317 by Senator Goldfinch. And hopefully we can get it across the finish line this year. There's certainly, this would be huge for boaters and anglers in the state that are already paying these taxes, and this would be a real tax cut for those folks to have more money in their pocket at the end of the year. And keep in mind, just because you're cutting taxes does not mean that that money that they save is not going to be taxed. The idea of giving people more money for them to choose how they spend it in our local economy is a better way than the government deciding how to spend that money. And so when you look at it from that perspective, Quintin, and going back to your revenue question, it's the whole idea that whenever you cut the cost on something, the demand for it will rise. And so we have to use basic economic principles at the same time as using solid findings and solid quantifiable data, but we cannot forget the simple economic principle that when you cut the price of something, more people will buy it. And then that gives people more money in their pockets to be able to spend in our local economies. You keep these boats here, the larger boats that might employ a couple people to help them run it. That's salaries, that's day rates, that's more gas, that's more beer if they choose to have it on their boat, that's tackle, ice, whatever it is. I mean, those are more days on the water for them to spend more money in our economy.
And I wanted to ask you this earlier, and I just thought about it again. But how exactly is inflation hurting you all currently?
Inflation. Let me start with this.
Yes,
During COVID, the boating and fishing industry saw a boom. People wanted to be outside, and people bought more boats than ever before. And it was for mental sanity. People wanted to spend time, away from having to social distance. We're seeing numbers get closer to pre-pandemic, but not quite there yet. Obviously, inflation hurts every industry, and it does rise the cost of goods. But we're hopeful that ways to combat inflation is when we can cut the fixed cost on a boat that's, a nice boat, a smaller boat, where you can cut fixed cost at the end of the year and not have an extra payment to worry about how you're going to battle inflation because you got to pay your government.
to be continued. I know you have to run, so I thank you for your time. Gettys Brannon, thank you so much for your time, and welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups again.
And thank you so much. I enjoyed it, Quintin, and look forward to talking with you soon.
Likewise.